Good. Hey guys, Mark Ferrasci, Protect Dog Training, and Aurora. Aurora was a kickback from my last litter. The lady that bought her went up into the Tahoe Hills into a cabin and didn't do much socialization at all, and the dog got robbed of that imprint period. You heard the last couple of videos I've been talking about it. Well, this is Aurora. See, she's about 4.5, 5 months of age, just got done with her teething. Couché. She might not totally be done. All the baby teeth are gone. See, we like to wait a month or so, a little bit more, to make sure these teeth get set in and they're really good, solid, couché. But she's got all her adult teeth now that are showing, and the baby teeth have been taken out. So she went up into the hills above Tahoe and trying to last out the pandemic with her son, and she went up into a cabin, and with very secluded type of environment, probably not much stimulation at all with other animals, people, or anything that she was getting as far as exposure to environment. And she might have went out a little bit in public, but she didn't know how to handle this kind of propensities and behavior from a high drive dog like this. And I got the dog back, and I saw right away that the dog's been under socialized. So I've got to try to recover the dog. We call it recovering the animal, right? So in a nutshell, I don't know how well that's going to work. There's always a risk that it may not work all the way. 85% is kind of what I'm gauging now, but she seems to be getting a little better every time. So what we'll do with what's called reactivity. Reactivity is one of the most common things that trainers, professionals will see. And the reason is because of the ignorance of the general public. They have no clue on how to handle this, and they get embarrassed and they get overwhelmed by this behavior coming from a young animal, and they put the dog in the backyard and they avoid going out in public because it's too much of a hassle. And so that ends up where the dog stays in that mental state of mind, and they never corrected it in those critical development periods. I've been talking about critical development periods. It's very important to be aware of the fact that dogs don't just come poofta as my finished dog like Joker or Buddy, the dogs that I've been working. I had to build that dog with all the work that I do, and layer on layer on layer of building that dog's confidence, getting the dog to be a strong individual to be able to accept what I'm into, which is personal protection and working dogs, right? So that being the case, I might have the breeds, but at the same time, I have to work at this stuff depending on the animal. And she has been robbed of her imprint period in this stage. So now I have to go out and I have to try to recover the dog and back this off and get the dog comfortable and overcome this problem that she's got. And it's not all that easy sometimes. You're always going to have something that's going to stick with her. Good girl, good. So in a nutshell, we're talking about reactivity, and I want to kind of get you guys aware of what it is and how to address it. And maybe that I don't think that you guys are going to learn enough that you can overcome it, because in general, when a customer comes to me and they have a reactive dog, I always suggest to them they let me do the job and do the end kennel work, and I can work the dog through it. It's a lot fairer to the animal. I know what I'm doing. If I try to tell somebody how to do it that's a layman, like I'm going to try to explain it to you, I'm doing it for you guys that maybe have gone through a training school or going through a training school and maybe not have enough experience under your belt to really understand it. And I'm going to give it to you in layman's terms, in my terminology. What is reactivity? Reactivity is nothing more than a display of behavior and negative behavior of aggression, okay? The dog will go off and start lunging at the leash, wanting to bite somebody. It may be a reactivity of somebody coming to your home or on the leash out in public. They see another dog. They may be dog reactive. They may be human reactive. They may have an adverse to humans trying to pet them. Why does that happen? It's because they haven't been exposed to it in those critical development periods in the right way to develop the dog and get them through this fear and insecurity is where it usually comes from, okay? So the way I look at it, my theory anyway, is that it probably comes from the old wolf pack-orientated attitude. Dogs are a descendant of the wolf, and they have a lot of that in them, so we always go back to that pack-orientated behavior and instincts, right? They travel a lot of miles in a day to eat and to do their thing, and they have a territory that's theirs. Any dog or any animal that comes into that area that's not part of their pack that's overwhelmed, they're going to try to drive it away as a pack. Nope. Good. So this behavior of reactivity, loading up, all of a sudden going off and just going crazy on maybe another dog or another person, that's called reactivity. So where does it come from? It's pretty well known in the industry that it comes from fear and insecurity. So confidence will overcome it if you can build some confidence. But exposure to the environment is really the key, right? So when I have a dog like this that already has a problem, I need to recover the dog. So I mix. I don't just go hot dogs. A lot of people that are all into the only positive will say give hot dogs and distract the dog and give the dog the confidence in knowing that you're going to protect them from that by going away from it. Okay, I don't agree with that. I believe that I need to be aware of and conscientious of when the behavior starts. I want to start changing behavior. So how do I do that? I mix in correction. You notice I have a pinch collar on her today because I'm going to start getting her used to a pinch. But if I was going out there and she was loading up like that and going totally crazy, I wouldn't want her a pinch because that pain threshold is over the top. I'm trying to make it conducive for her to learn and grow. So to do that, I need to keep her what's called below threshold. Okay, what is threshold? Threshold basically is the line in the sand where the dog can't accept, and once they go over it, they're over threshold and they wind up and they're going off, and you can't, it's not conducive to trying to teach a dog when they're in that state of mind. Okay, so my goal is to keep it below threshold where the dog can learn and grow and keep showing the dog the patterns and giving him the right answers, which would mean food, toy, whatever it may be to get the dog into being into me, right? So what I will do is what I call floating the bubble, which means if I'm in a park and I go out there, I have to figure out where's my threshold. Is it 2 feet away from me that the dog freaks out? Is it 5 feet away from me from the dog? Or is it 10, 15, 20 feet away and there's a dog and she even sees a dog and she goes crazy? Okay? Or a person or anything coming at her, right? Where is that threshold? And my job is to watch the dog, read the dog's body language, and try to catch the dog before it goes over threshold or right before it's in that state of mind that's no longer in a really good quality learning state of mind, and work on my patterns. Everything's about pattern and routine, right? And in training. Asi, good girl. Couché. Good. And now I've worked with her enough that she understands the commands a little bit, but more importantly, her marker words. We need to establish the markers. Yes, good, and no, right? And we also have our explosion release, which is a marker as well. Yep. Good girl. Notice how she right away exploded right off of that when I say yep. Very receptive to learning and growing when you do things the right way. So we need to use that. Couché. Good. And do it in such a way that we use these tools because it's consistency. Consistency and patterns are your friend, right? Very important. So when I go out, I might see in a park, I might see something that's over there. I'll watch the dog's body language and I'll do a right about turn away from it. Redirect the dog into the food. Don't let their mind go into the worried state of mind. You don't want the dog, you ever hear the trainers talk about the dog locks in eyeball-wise? You're almost over that stage when you let that happen. You want to redirect the dog's behavior, get them into the food or the toy before they get to that state where they're in that state and they're loading up and all of a sudden, boom, they explode, right? We want to avoid that. So we keep our awareness and conscientious and aware of where that threshold's at. And then I will do my healing towards that object and then heal away from it. And I'll try to keep the dog below threshold and into these patterns of positivity and never letting the dog's mind go to what I call the worried state of mind, right? We don't want them to get all worried and freaked out because that's where it's coming from. It's coming from fear and insecurity and worry. Right? The dog feels like it has to defend itself or it wants to chase this away. In the pack, the dogs travel a lot of area and they will end up getting another dog come into their area and they will chase it away or kill it. And the reason what they're doing is they're trying to drive it out of their area. Right? If the other dog takes off and runs, they'll run after it until they reach the edge of their border and they'll stop chasing that other animal because it's no longer in their area. So that's what a dog's trying to do when they're exploding and driving towards us. They're trying to drive that negative aversive thing that in their mind is causing all this anxiety and fear. They're trying to drive it away from them, right? So that's where it comes from, reactivity. How to solve it is try to make sure you're aware of and conscientious of threshold, right? And keeping the dog below that threshold level and on the positive side, and then slowly but surely taking your bubble. I look at this as an imaginary bubble around the dog, wherever that threshold is at out here. And there's also a bubble around that other dog that's over there, and I'll float my bubbles, right? Floating with right about turns and away from it, and trying to keep the dog under threshold and redirected with the food and the motivational tools to make sure that the dog doesn't go into the worried state of mind. You see me doing this a lot when I'm doing all my stuff. When I was talking about agility and getting the dog to go on the wacky boards where it's up and it's down. The dog's insecure and can't keep its balance because it's not sure of himself, not confident, right? I will start a game and I create a behavior loop. You've heard me talk about behavior loops as well, where I will take the food and I'll say, find it. Yep, come on. Good girl, good. Hup, Asi, couché. Good. So she has all her markers in place now, where we have a good baseboard of communication with that. Good girl, yep. Good girl, yay! Then now I can use this out in public with my chatter and my voice tone and all the things that I'm doing. Couché. Good. So the whole point of view here is what I'm trying to tell you is we want to keep the dog under threshold, and we have to learn to float that bubble where they're right about turns and keeping the dog distracted and never letting their brain go to the worried state of mind. So that little trick I have when I take the dog across the benches in a park or across some kind of surface, I'll say, find it, and I'll put the food down. Find it, put the food down. Find it, put the food down. And what happens is the dog gets conditioned to hearing find it and seeing my hand go to the ground, and right away their brain goes out of that worried state of mind. We're talking about agility here, but it's the same thing. It's very similar. Where all of a sudden the dog will get worried and they end up losing their balance because they're so freaked out about falling, right? It's where your mental mind state's at. So we create that mind state that creates a different thing, and the dog will now start to be walking and they don't even get into the worried state of mind, and they can start to do this agility because they're not insecure and afraid. That's confidence, right? Good. So we're going to do the same thing out in public. When we're using our toy, we get them used to what we call an anchor. We want the dog high on the toy, get them into that toy, so we have something to be able to use to keep their mind from going into that negative state of mind, right? So that's the general overview of reactivity and how to handle it. The most important thing is, this is why I don't let my customers do anything with reactive dogs. I always want to do it myself because I can get it done and over with a lot faster and do a lot better job with the animal than somebody that I'm trying to teach this, because I've got years of being able to read the animal, being able to see where the dog's head's at when they're doing things, and be able to have my timing that's exact in what I'm doing. And I will mix in corrections. You notice I have a choke chain on her. This is what I want. I wanted the choke chain. I started with a flat collar. She's got a pinch on her this morning, but I started with the flat collar, and I started nipping her every time she would start showing this behavior and redirecting her into me. In the beginning, it was real tough because she was just over threshold because everything got her upset, right? And then I kept it up until we had an established consistency in the rules that she understood that this behavior was causing a negative. And I right away redirected into the positive, which was the toys and the food, keep her distracted, keep her mind out of a worried state of mind. The other things that I really work on is having anchors. So I have my toy that I create as an anchor here at home, get them high on that toy. I have something to be able to use when I'm out in public. That's very important for solving a problem like this. Then the other thing that I did, and everything's very fluid, guys. It's very fluid and flexible in regards to every dog is different. You have to figure out the triggers. What is making them go off? When do they do this behavior that's negative, right? Good girl. Yep. Couche. Couche. Good. All this chattering is kind of hard for her because she's not used to it. I always flow with my training. It's done over within about 5-10 minutes. We're done out of here, right? And today here I am yakking away. Couche. So I can't expect her to be doing any better than she's doing right now. All right, so I'm doing a brain blank here, folks. I'm trying to figure out where I was at with this. Floating the bubble and being consistent, and then our timing involved with this, right? So I've got to watch the dog. Nope. Good. Couche. Now she just got a hot dog off the ground, and that's not a good thing. Good. So this choke chain allows me to give that jerk release correction you've heard me talk about, and be very correct with my correction, very precise, and then it's timing, because they don't feel anything, and all of a sudden it's pop, right? So I will catch the dog in showing me that behavior, and right away it's nope, and going away from it, and then keeping the dog below threshold is the answer, okay? And then keep floating your bubble back and forth to create these patterns the dog learns to work with. Yep, yay, good girl. So that you end up having consistency and pattern and routine that allow you to start being able to solve the problem. Yep, good girl. And then as time goes along, I will start trying to hand people hot dogs and get her to go into people. Right now, she's being really apprehensive, and she's showing almost a bark, and she doesn't want to touch the people. So I started it with my hand. She's coming into my hand for the hot dogs because she knows this behavior loop that I've already created, which is this little hand signal, right? To come into that lure. Then I will take the hot dogs and I will take my lure and I will put them right into their hand, and I'll ask them to go backwards with their hand, so we kind of right away just transition it right into their hand. Now she smells them. She smells them and she says, oh, there's food there. Now we got at least one behavior going where she goes learning to go into that hand to get the hot dogs. That's one of the first steps with handling reactivity. It's not easy all the time because you have dogs that are very fearful. And so we have to work on all this other stuff and teach them that there are negative consequences for doing this negative behavior. So timing is very important. And then keeping the dog under threshold, very important, because if you don't, what ends up happening, the dog goes over threshold, winds up and loads up to a point that all the correction in the world is not being conducive to learning, is being abusive, right? So we want to keep the dog below that threshold and make sure we keep the positive going so that we get a lot more build on our positive association, right? How do you create behaviors? Couché. And it's a good subject to get into. There was a trainer many years ago that used to tell me the behaviors were like putting sand in a bucket. Or pebbles in a bucket. I have an empty bucket, and I take one pebble, a positive, positive, positive. And I keep trying to build on the positive association because I want good performance and I want a good attitude. That's positive, right? Negatives is also pebbles in the bucket. But what I want to do is build on positive. So I keep doing these behaviors, keep doing this stuff, and keep throwing the pebbles into the bucket. One day the bucket fills up and overflows, and you've got a full, solid behavior. Right? So that's the way I look at behaviors, is pebbles in the bucket, meaning it takes hundreds and thousands of times doing the same repetitions again and again and again till you build these behaviors. That's what we do, okay? Así. Yes, good. Couché. Good. Good. After a while, good means something. What does good mean? Good means the food is coming to me and going to be put between the legs, okay? So it's a good example of building behaviors. Good girl, good. So that's kind of an overview of reactivity. And again, with me anyway, there are some trainers out there that are giving classes on this. I don't agree with it because people don't have the ability to do it and they end up making a lot of mistakes. It's not fair to the animal. It's easier for me as a professional to get through the problem and be fairer to the animal to do it in the right way and address it in the right way. Reactivity is a very common problem, and it happens because people end up not knowing how to address it. And they don't understand really what socialization is. Socialization doesn't mean that I want my dog to be friendly with everybody. It means that I want them to be neutral and blasé to environment, anything that comes through it, and be strong enough to not even worry about it, to not care. That's socialization. And it takes a lot of exposure to environment to keep working on that to get the dog to that point. If you don't, you miss these critical development periods like this little girl has missed. You're going to have to do what I'm doing, and you're going to have to recover the animal. How well you can recover the animal, there is never a guarantee. You never know. I look at behavior and negative behavior that's happening. It's kind of like getting a scratch on a record. Remember the old vinyl records that get a scratch in the record, and after a while you try to polish that scratch out, and if you were halfway good at it, you would have it with a needle, wouldn't want to track back and fall back into that same deep crevice, right? Because you had polished it out. That's the key. We're trying to recondition the animal, counter-condition the animal to a point where they end up not having that needle go right back to that same negative. But in a big way, it's like a gravity. It's almost like that needle wants to track back to that scratch. Right? And that's behavior. And when we counter condition behavior and we overcome it, it's all about polishing that scratch out of the record and recreating other type of behaviors that will overcompensate and have it so that needle doesn't want to track to that negative behavior. But it always has a tendency, and it will. It'll always want to go back to that same spot on the record, right? Or in behavior. Okay? So that's kind of what you want to look at when you're dealing with something like that. That's what you're doing. You're reconditioning the animal. And in this case, she never had the exposure, so her mental attitude is to go off and be reactive to anything coming at her. She'll get better and better at it. Couché. I'll see if I can keep trying to show this. I've got a guy coming up today, and I'll see if I can go down to Tractor Supply with him. We'll do some film and see if I can show you guys me working this behavior out in public. Así. Nope. Así. Yes. Good girl. Good. All right. Aurora. And she is available, guys, if you guys are interested. Good girl. I want to get her a good home, but we've got to work her through this problem. I won't want to let her go until I know that she's over this as much as she can be. Good girl. Place. Yes. Good. Smart little girl. Good girl. Nope. Good. Good. Nope. What does good mean? It means keep it up. You're doing the right thing, right? Good. It starts when we do our downs. That's where I start my duration marker anyway, in between the legs, and saying good and doing pauses, building on time level and things, so the dog learns that they're doing the right thing with my good. Good. Yeah, you go. Good girl. Come on. Good girl. Good. You're not as good at that way, huh? So I always want to do it right and left. She's not as good at this way as she's the other way. Yes. Good girl. Good. Good girl. Yes, good girl. Up, yay. Yes, good. Up, yay. Yes, good girl. Up, yay. Nope. Yes. Yes, good. All right. Hup. Couché. Good. Pebbles in the bucket. All right, guys. Hopefully that was kind of a halfway decent overview of reactivity. Thank you very very much. Mark Ferrasci, ProTech Dog Training and Aurora.